Daisy May, thank you so much for talking to me today. And I'm so appreciative. And the reason that I was really want to speak to you is because you really inspired me to talk about how to talk about in instances of racism or microaggressions between, you know, and you gave a really great example I found personally helpful. I'd love us to hear about more today. But also I want to say have told me that you've been feeling really inspired about the anti-racism conversation, and I'd love to hear what is it that's inspiring you so much.
I think the conversation, it just made me realise that we cannot tolerate racism in any shape or form. It doesn't matter if you're young, you're old, and you know, an old person might call a person of colour something that we don't like. We still need to find a way to challenge that. But when we challenge, we've got to be sympathetic, we've got to be compassionate, really, because we have to, I suppose, take that person's experience and the conditions they grew up in and why that might happen. But it doesn't mean we cannot challenge it. And that was really eye-opening for me, because sometimes you think, oh, that person, well, they don't really know any better, they're all right. But then it's not all right. We have to find a way for everybody, all of us together, to challenge racism.
Thank you, Daisy May. And I really honour and appreciate that thing that you're talking about. What you're saying is two things. First of all, it should never, there's no excuses for racism. We never excuse racism. No. It should never, ever, ever go unchallenged. The second thing he said is, when we challenge, let's be compassionate. I suppose what comes up for me is I really love that point, but I also just think to myself, in my mind, I think, and we do not necessarily require the person who's on the receiving end of that racism to be compassionate. No. Because actually, yeah, I don't know if you want to speak to that a little.
I think, yeah, it could be seen as, if you say the word compassionate towards somebody that's been racist, that you're condoning them. But for me, if you don't think about where that's come from, then you're just going to be quite defensive, and it's not going to come across. To me, I've had it in my life, all my life, and I can think of older white people that I've worked in a previous career saying things to me that were so racist, but I had to challenge it. And I remember thinking, sometimes I laughed it off, but that has sat with me all these years. You know, it sat with me for over 30 years. I can't do that. So there has to be a way of challenging things where you have to have some compassion in yourself to be able to do it. You have to have, where is my mindset? I'm not just going to say, you can't call me this, you can't do that, it's racist. It's not necessarily going to make a difference, is it? If you think, if you say to somebody, why have you said that to me, or what is it that doesn't make me feel comfortable? Where did that come from? Or just ask them to explain it. It opens it up to have the conversation rather than shutting conversations down. And it's not, you know, in a sense, it's not me as a black woman should have to keep doing this. It's for all of us to do it. So I think if I'm modelling something and somebody else is seeing that, we all start doing that. And I know for a fact, because it started to happen in my life, that I'm seeing people challenging things or having these, what we call critical and courageous conversations. But you have to, I suppose for me, is thinking about what is your end goal? What is it that you're trying to achieve? And if we're just trying to have an interaction that's quite, you've said this, it's wrong, end of, then it doesn't necessarily move things on. But if you have a conversation where you have an explanation, that person can talk back to you, you can talk back to them, you're more likely to maintain a relationship and have a better outcome. But it isn't for just a black person or a person of colour to do this. It's for everybody, whatever colour, whatever race, whatever background. We all challenge racism. I'm not an expert on racism. I've experienced it, but it doesn't mean I've got a degree in it. We've all got to challenge it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. What you're saying is, one of the really big messages you're saying is, like, don't leave it to a black person to challenge the racism. Everybody's got to challenge that racism. And one of the ways that you can do that, I think you're suggesting very strongly to me, is that when we do challenge racism, it might be helpful to do it with compassion. And you gave this lovely example of, like, you know, you said, like, I'm not an expert. Just because I've experienced racism doesn't make me an expert in racism. And actually, I think one of the things you really invite us to do is like step outside the role of expert for all of us and step into the role of this matters to everybody and we're all learning together. Could you give that lovely example of how you discuss with your friend? Yeah,
I mean, I have a friend who's a very close friend, a white friend, and years ago she said something to me that really upset me. And at the time I sort of laughed it off, but it was a racist comment. I laughed it off, but it sat with me, as lots of things happen over the years. And because of the conversation that we've had all around that it's not tolerated, I did feel that I needed to go back and have that conversation. And it was really difficult. I felt really anxious. I was carrying that. I didn't want to upset her. I didn't want to ruin the friendship, but I also didn't want to have this in my mind that pops up every now and then. So I told her how I felt. I told her that I'm anxious about this, but it's something that was said and it didn't fit comfortably with me. And I said what it was. And she was absolutely devastated. One, that I'd taken so long to say it. And two, that she didn't realise the impact it had on me for that amount of time, and could see then, wow, that it wasn't the right thing to say. It wasn't maybe how she meant it, but she just didn't realise that that would be the impact. And it just made her see everything quite differently. And, you know, we were able to talk. We had a really lovely conversation backwards and forwards and moved on from that. But what's been interesting is going back to say to her, I said to her, oh, I just wanted to check in with you about that conversation. She went, oh, not again, because she then said, actually, and she was really grateful that I had checked in, because she said she was fine, but it opened up so much more for her in her life. She said it's made her able to challenge conversations that she has with other white people when she hears things, because she knows that it could impact on people, but just in her general life, when just through class, all different aspects of life, that she now looks at things and she's more mindful and challenges and more mindful about what she says. So that to me shows that it's so important, whether we get things wrong or say things wrong, or your colleague or whoever it is gets it wrong, we have to keep having the conversation. I think I said to you earlier, it's like being in a tennis match, and we just got to keep going backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. Sometimes we're going to drop the ball. The game isn't over. We just pick it up and we start again, and we just keep going. And we're trying to maintain a friendship, a relationship. We're trying to maintain dialogue and communication.
Thank you so much. One of the things that you've really helped me with is like when we're challenging, because I think sometimes I get anxious about how I challenge racism. I like either, you know, I'm very kind of like tentative, or else I can get very like, well, you know, you've said that and it's totally unacceptable. And actually what you're saying is think about challenging racism to maintain a relationship and improve a relationship, to like help that relationship go. And you've offered a vision of going, you know, if you can do that in a way that opens up a much closer relationship and opens up possibility for each other. And you've also talked about like step outside the role of expert and like step into a human being that's learning and trying to get stuff right. I mean, I'm really thoughtful when I sit here listening to you, and I think, wow, I also feel that the fact that you've had to carry the labor of experiencing all that racism for all those years, and that it's been laid on you to like bring it to people, and then like, oh, why didn't you bring it earlier? And I think, oh gosh, I can really appreciate why you might not have brought that earlier. What should I do as a white woman to, if I think I've done something racist, or I've made a microaggression inadvertently, or out of like ignorance, or, you know, I'm learning all the time, should I wait for someone to bring that up with me, do you think, or what would you suggest for me? Because I might worry about, oh, maybe I'll re-traumatize, or maybe I'll, you know, make an awkward. Yeah, what would you recommend for me, Daisy?
It can start off as being awkward. You know, as I said, I'm not an expert. It was awkward for me to have that conversation, but you have to have it. You have to say, you have to own your feelings. And you have to say, when I said this, I felt like this, or did you experience it like that? We all then own how we feel and respond to it. But I'd rather that than hold it and wait for it to come to you, because that doesn't feel natural to me. And as I said, racism isn't just about people of colour going out and fighting the war. It's about everybody. It's not acceptable. And though I can say, you know, you bring compassion to it, it's not acceptable. But you have to have a way of having the conversations without, because sometimes it's really painful. You know, just speaking to you, I can think of things people have said to me in the past or incidents that have happened to me. And the feeling that I have towards that person isn't of love and compassion, but I need to be able to manage it. And I need to be able to think, how am I going to have this conversation? Because I want it to stop. And I think as a white woman or anybody, you should want it to stop. You should want it to stop as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Daisy May. And I think, you know, I was listening to something recently, and I think I mentioned it to you, somebody saying, you know, a woman called Shireen Daniels having a discussion about saying, actually, it's okay if you've been on the receiving end of racism, that you don't have to hold that compassion. It is okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you've given a really helpful example of a moment where you absolutely did hold that for your friend. But also, as a white woman, what I can do is go, I don't challenge it, but maybe I cannot challenge it and hold compassion. But I'll challenge it and hold compassion. But I don't need to expect the friend who's been on the receiving end of that, or the colleague, to hold that compassion. That's my work to do. But I love your thing of like challenging each other to maintain relationships, whether it's about racism, classism, or just about moments where we have to come up against each other.
Yeah, anything, because it then moves out of just racism. It moves to power imbalances. It moves to so many things in our lives, and we all get things wrong. I think what stops people from having conversations is we think we're going to say the wrong words, or it's going to make it worse. I think when I talk about compassion, and sympathy, it's about, we are going to get it wrong sometimes. We're going to say the wrong words, and we're going to go, oh, I didn't mean that, and then it's made it worse. But that's why I think it's about hearing each other and accepting sometimes somebody says it wrong. They're not conversations that happen naturally at the moment in life. I think they're getting better. So if you feel someone's been racist, and then they're trying to have a conversation with you about it, and then they say something else because they're nervous that sounds a bit even more racist than the first thing, if we shut them down, we're not moving past that. That person isn't learning how to have that conversation, and it is really difficult. It is a bit of a backwards and forwards in how we try to mesh together, but we do need to start somewhere. But it isn't just me having to do that, it's the other person.
Yeah, I thank you. I really appreciate that. We do need to keep having this conversation. It was something that actually you said to me also just before we started recording, that you were saying, and I was saying as well, actually this conversation is really helpful. We need to keep talking about racism. We need to keep bumbling and having these conversations. We need to not go, we've done that. We need to create spaces where we keep going, oh, what do I do if, or how did that come across, and actually that it sort of builds a bit on Elaine's mic drop, where we talk about checking in with each other. How was that for you? Did I get that wrong? You know, and being ready to hear it. Daisy May, thank you. Oh, sorry, do you want to, is there any final reflection that you want to offer? Yeah,
it was just what you was just saying, that because sometimes I think when we talk about racism, we talk about it and then we say we've got to have some training. We have the training, and then we think, oh, we've done that, we can move on. To me, racism isn't just about training and development. Yes, there is a need for training, but it is that ongoing conversation that might be uneasy, like you said, we've got to keep checking on, because as we do that, it will develop and open out more. So for me, it isn't just about training, it's about how we work on an everyday basis with everyone.
Thank you so much, Daisy May. It's not about training, it's not cognitive, it's about entering the space of vulnerability, checking in, rechecking, opening up, and being ready to correct and learn all the time.
Definitely.
And that's an amazing opportunity to us as well, isn't it? Wow.
Yes.
Daisy May, thank you so much for this. Has been so helpful, and I really think other people will find this very useful as well. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you.